Next sports joke here. That's enough. And then if necessary, I'm going to run upstairs.
All right. So welcome to the ICSE Showcase panel. My name is Joanne Atley. I am here with Seb Ukatel, Marcia Chechik, and Nino Mavidovic is not here, but he is here in spirit. And we are here as the ICSE Showcase chairs. And can I get slides? Okay, so you may have seen the ICSE Showcase in the program. This was created because a group of us have noticed that there has been a historic and perpetual underrepresentation of what we're calling early phase SE activities in the ICSE program. So for this year, that includes requirements engineering, software architecture and design, software modeling, and formal methods. So what that means this year is we have invited the best papers from the top conferences in these areas to represent their work at ICSE this year. We're calling this kind of a specialized conference first presentation, so they don't have a paper here, they're just simply representing their work. And plus this panel. So what we're trying to achieve with this panel is to raise awareness of the underrepresentation of these topics at ICSE, hopefully to spend some time talking about possible causes, so sort of a diagnosis of the problem, and then spending some time on actionable recommendations. So I'm going to start with some analysis of review data. So we have gone through all of the submissions of papers from ICSE 17 through ICSE 2023. We're missing 1 year, but that will be fixed. Just to give some initial ideas about what the problem is and some early diagnoses, or certainly testing of some hypotheses about why we might have underrepresentation of these topics. Okay, so to give you a sense of what the data set looks like, these are the number of submissions and acceptances and the acceptance rates of these 6 conferences, ICSE 6 conferences. You'll see that the acceptance rate varies from the 17% to 26%, and this is important when you start looking at the acceptance rates of papers within particular topics. As you try to compare papers by topic from 6 different conferences, and 6 different conferences have different topic lists, the first thing we had to do was to kind of homogenize what the paper topic list was. So we did that by, effectively trying to create a reasonable list. It was 38 paper topics, and then mapped each paper's topic list to this 38 list of topics. All right, so number one hypothesis is that people simply aren't submitting to ICSE, right? They're submitting to other places. And so there might be some, that this might be a reasonable cause, or at least one of the factors. You'll see that the submission rate of, or I should say that the percentage of submissions in the red colored topics, these are the 4 showcase areas of requirements, architecture, formal methods, and modeling. They're not at the bottom, but they are only about 20%, right? Like the topics that have the highest numbers of submissions are about 4 to 5 times of the number of submissions that the showcase topics get. So yes, we don't have as many submissions as testing, as empirical engineering, as the AI, but it's not like we've got 10% of the number of submissions that they have. It's closer to 20 to 25% of the submissions that they have. Looking at acceptance rate, you'll see that the acceptance rate in these areas is quite a bit lower. If you remember, the acceptance rates in general They ranged from 17 to 26. The acceptance rates in these categories are 12% up to 18%. Okay, so this might be something that we need to be looking at. Number of champion papers, right? How often are papers in these topics championed? And again, you'll see a skew to lower numbers of papers that are likely to be championed by some reviewer on the committee. One of the hypotheses was that the reviewers on the PC simply don't have the expertise to review these topics. And at least they are, that's not coming out as a possible cause, or at least the reviewers are claiming that they've got the expertise to review these papers. One of the hypotheses is the number of reviewers assigned to a paper. So this can affect the acceptance rate. Like it is hypothesized that the higher number of reviewers assigned to a paper, the more chances there are of that paper being rejected, right? There's more people evaluating that paper, more people finding possible problems and reasons to reject. So you do see that these papers often will be assigned an extra reviewer, and the acceptance rate of papers that have more than 3 reviewers, the papers in the showcase topics have a lower acceptance rate. Okay. So that was sort of just the review of ICSE data. I also wanted to go through a survey that we did before the conference. So everybody who registered for ICSE, who indicated that they do research in requirements, architecture, modeling, and formal methods, was sent an email to participate in a survey. I'm going to show the results as of May 11th, but the survey continues to be open. So if you didn't complete the survey, we encourage you to do so, because we are continuing to analyze these answers. So what I'm going to do with these slides is go over the results of the respondents that we have so far. It's about 61 respondents. And then we're going to give some time for everybody to kind of digitally make annotations and comments on the slide so that we kind of get at least an electronic record of everyone's opinions of the results so far. And then we'll go over as a group the annotated slides. So we're going to do one presentation, 10 minutes of you adding your own comments, and then open the floor to discussion about these slides. Okay, so first question was who are you? And so keeping in mind that lots of researchers do research in multiple areas, you'll see that 47% do requirements, almost 60% do work in architecture and design, 53.6% do research in software modeling, and about 39% do work in formal methods. So that's who we are, or at least the people who responded to the survey. We asked, do you publish in ICSE, right? So again, this kind of gets back to the question of, are we simply not submitting to ICSE? And you'll see that very few of the respondents, publish most of their results in ICSE. And in fact, the majority of people either publish very few of their papers in ICSE or none of their papers in ICSE. So whether this is, admittedly, this question is posed as, are your papers appearing, right? Are your papers published? And so this could be a combination of submission and acceptance. But we're not getting at least a majority of our papers in ICSE. We asked if you're not publishing in ICSE, why is that the case? So this was an open-ended question. We got lots of different answers. I'm not going to go through them all. The number on the left kind of is an indication of the number of comments that fell into that particular opinion. And they're grouped kind of roughly into 3 categories, with the that top list of categories effectively has to do with whether these topics have sort of fallen out of favor at ICSE. The second one is, and you know, if that's the perception, maybe we don't want to submit here, right? So there's this perception that these topics have simply fallen out of favor at ICSE. The second group has to do with the role of reviewers and, you know, again, perceptions of the composition of the PC. You know, are they interested in these papers? Do they have the expertise to evaluate these papers? And then the third category is, you know, whether there's a preference to submit to specialized conferences. Oops. When it came to specialized conferences, we asked, if you don't submit to ICSE, where else are you submitting? We got lots of different answers. And here the size of the conference listed reflects the number of respondents who mentioned that conference. So, you know, lots of people are publishing their work in ICSA. So moving on, you know, why do we care? Why is this important? Maybe we should all just be going to the AI session, right? So, you know, what are the benefits to having a better representation of these topics at ICSE? Again, you can see the number of respondents who mentioned each kind of opinion. These are grouped into roughly 3 categories. One of them is sort of, you know, what is the benefit to each researcher's research, right? Being able to draw on what is being presented by others at ICSE. The second category is sort of just the benefit to the researcher's career, being able to, you know, present and publish in the top conference in software engineering is what's often deemed as the top conference in software engineering. And the third one, just the networking that happens here. The benefits to ICSE, all the categories fell into the benefits of ICSE, benefits to ICSE. So you can be able to comment on that as well. And then 2 questions asked about, you know, what recommendations, right? What should we be doing, and what should ICSE be doing to correct for this problem? So these opinions fell into about 5 different categories in terms of recommendations to ICSE. One of them having to do with the composition of the PC, right? You know, do we need to make changes to that, or at least recommend changes to that? Number 2, should we be making changes or recommending changes to the review process and the evaluation criteria being used for papers in these categories? The third group looks at, you know, the promotion, right? Should we be doing more to promote these topics in general, to encourage researchers in these areas to submit to ICSE? Should we simply be trying to increase the number of submissions to ICSE? The fourth category was recommendations related to the conference program. So if the papers from the technical track don't fall into this category, should we be rounding out the program to have at least representation in the program in terms of using keynotes and invited talks, panels, et cetera. And then the 5th category was a recommendation to the steering committee about interacting with the conferences in these areas, with the researchers in these areas. All right. Last question, like a second to last question, is recommendation for the communities. Like, what should we be doing in terms of our own behavior? These comments fell into 5 different categories. One of them was, you know, trying to increase representation and recognition of these areas through other tracks at the conference, through by proposing workshops, by proposing co-located conferences. So again, let's increase the representation at the conference through these other mechanisms. Second category is different types of advice for authors about how to improve their papers. So keep in mind, this is not this is the respondents' advice. So, things like, we should be strengthening the way we talk about the significance of the research, right? We should be, in some sense, aligning our papers to the expectations of an ICSE paper. Third category is, we should be doing more simply to grow and support communities, like through mentorship. And the fourth category is, helping to improve the evaluation of research in those areas, right? So what can we be doing to make it easier for us to do our evaluations, right? In the forms of benchmarks, in the forms of, large repositories of artifacts that we can use for evaluation. Last question in the survey was, this year's ICSE showcase, looked at 4 areas. Did the respondents think there were other areas that were underrepresented? Lots of sort of one-offs respondents at the very bottom, human factors being probably the most prevalent topic there. All right. So what I'm going to ask now is for you to open up your laptops for about 10 minutes and think about your reactions to these responses, right? So some of them may be your responses. Some of them, you may have reactions to other people's responses. You may want to add new responses after you have seen other people's responses. So the link is to a Google slide, which is just the showcase slides that I just produced. If you add annotations, I don't know if you've ever, been involved in sort of a speed feedback exercise with little dots to say the things that you like and the things that you don't like. Use check marks, use X's to, indicate whether, you think an idea is, you agree with an idea, you think you disagree with an idea. Do you have additional comments that you think the community should be looking at, that you think ICSE should be looking at? Please don't use Google Slide comments, because they won't appear in, if you use Google Slide comments, then when we download the Google Slides into a PowerPoint presentation to present for discussion, they won't appear. Right? They'll just appear as a little comment icon, but the comment itself won't appear. So any questions about that? About what we're asking, yeah.
Comments on all of the slides or this particular slide?
Oh, all the slides. Yeah. Anything that you're interested in commenting on. Yeah.
I'm actually very surprised about that big human factors in the slide.
Yeah. I know.
Well,
it's a very
the top 8.
I know. It's well represented. It's well represented. Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, let's change. All right. So, you have 10 minutes. Or, if you want to, if you're done earlier than that, then we can switch back. All right. So we are going to open the floor for questions and discussion and comments and feedback and reactions. We we do need to run the microphone around now, because even though I'm sure that most of you can be heard, you won't be heard on the recording unless you speak into the microphone. So if you've got comments, reactions, raise your hand. We'll run the mic to you, and wait for the mic before you before you start. All right. So publishing in ICSE. How come we don't publish in ICSE? There is a question about are these patterns consistent across the other SE venues? We don't have the direct evidence for that because we haven't analyzed those. We haven't number one, we haven't analyzed those reviewer databases, and we haven't asked this specific question about those other SE venues. But we have certainly seen low representation of these topics in these other conferences. So any other thoughts? Wait.
So over there is another one that is kept. I mean, it's the question about publishing or submitting. Because having both information, and I remember when I filled the form,
Exactly where your mindset was.
Because yeah, exactly. Do you mean, because it will be interesting to see how many submit.
That's right.
And then don't get the paper accepted.
That's correct.
Maybe we get few papers just because there are few submissions. So,
that's right.
And this question alone, I think, doesn't answer.
That's exactly
those
right.
questions.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and I think when I answered it, I answered it as if, do I submit, right? Do I submit with the intent of publishing? But you're right. This particular wording conflates those two, and I didn't even realize that until I was standing here reading it, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that really means. Yeah.
Because, from my point of view, if we can, do we start, or do you want first to go through the...
No. We're probably going to go through these slides once.
Okay.
So let's talk about the slide.
Okay. So because I think it's very important what you're doing, first of all, so thank you very much. I'm here somehow representing the software architecture community as a steering committee chair of ICSA, or part of the software architecture community at least. And we really appreciate what you're doing, okay? Because we recognize that this is an issue. And when I was young, I remember software architecture was one of the top topics and submissions and participation at ICSE, and then slowly. One thing that I may suggest to do after this meeting, if it may be of value, we as communities, I'm looking at mine, but maybe also the others, we can submit a similar or the same questionnaires to our community and see what they think, because I can come here with my personal ideas on why ICSA or EXA, I mean software architecture, is not really present, but I cannot be representative today of what, hundreds of researchers. So if it may be of value, an idea could be to propagate this to our authors and ask them directly why. Because I think what you're doing is extremely important. And when you invited us to submit, I was, wow, because 2 months before when I started my chairing, one of the points that I put in my program is increasing visibility in software engineering communities.
Right.
Then when we got your request, we say, okay, wow, we are in line because we understand both that there is this potential issue. So let's see how we can cooperate to do that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Is someone taking notes? So yes, and so number one, I think it would be great to run this survey with the communities themselves, because this survey went to people who registered for ICSE, right? And we want to reach the people who are not registering for ICSE and who are not submitting to ICSE, number one. And number two, when we pose that, it's not just about ICSE, right? It really is about, all three major SE conferences. Thank you. Jane.
Yeah, so Mike, so I would be really interested in knowing, because I was told previously, especially about the software architecture, that somebody made a comment to me one time that the software architects, researchers are kind of harsh on each other's papers. And I don't know if it's true or not, so I don't want to say that's true. But I think that would be interesting to see who, if you dug in even deeper to the data, you could actually find out, is it because that we don't have the right expertise, or is it true that people are being harsh on their own papers from their own group?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What we don't have for privacy reasons, what we don't have are the reviewer names on papers. So we have their self-expressed expertise, and I've also heard from the software architecture community in particular that they feel that the reviewers say that they are expert enough to review this paper, and then they possibly misreview the paper. So that might be hard to really tease out. We are hopefully possibly looking at exploring the actual text of reviews, like using AI to analyze, why are papers in these areas getting rejected? Why are papers in other areas getting rejected? Is there a difference? But I don't know. So I don't know that we'll actually be able to pinpoint that particular hypothesis. But I think it is a recognized hypothesis. We just don't know how to test it. Daniel. One more.
Yeah, as a member of the Models Steering Committee, I would also like to say thanks for this initiative. I think it's really important, and I think already the initial set of data that you showed shows that, yes, there is a certain issue to solve. We can also run the related survey in models. I have personal experiences with ICSI, both positive and negative ones. What I find as a recurring issue is related to a perceived level of practicality or of papers coming from a models community. I received repeated complaints and some rejections in earlier years based on, this is not useful enough, while at the same time, my company has been making a living for 10 years now, so it's again more of a perceived level of thing. After a PhD defense in the UK, I had a very nice chat actually with a leading researcher there who is not from the modeling community, and I think some of his changes in his mindset with respect to MBSE papers was kind of representative before there is a certain kind of perceived feeling that, MBSE is past. And yes, this is not flashy, but it's very useful in certain areas, which, yes, not Facebook, not the shiny, so under the hood, but still big markets.
Exactly, right? I think these areas do have a lot of industrial applicability, and they're not solved problems, right? It's not the case that we shouldn't be doing research in these areas because the problems are solved, right? These are still critical open problems, right? I'm gonna advance to the next slide. If you don't publish an SE... Can I add? Oh, yes.
I have a question. So
yes.
I know that, my understanding is that the problem is that we would like to increase the number of submissions on these topics. But do you know if the ratio between accepted and submitted for these topics is the same as the ratio for the others?
It is, well, the acceptance rate tells you that. Right, the acceptance rate.
But was that the acceptance rate or the number of accepted papers?
Though that was the acceptance rate.
Okay.
Those low numbers were the acceptance rate.
Oh, yeah, I thought they were accepted. Okay.
No,
sorry, my bad.
No, that's the problem. All right, so if you don't publish, why not? So certainly the feeling that essay and design is very difficult to be published at ICSI, MBSE considered to be dead paradigms. We didn't get a lot of answers like that, but we certainly got some respondents like that, right? Like these topics are out of fashion. There used to be more papers in the 90s and 2000s. What happened? Lower than other fields at ICSE, but not lower than other conferences. So that's, I mean, certainly not lower than at other SE conferences, right? This is uniform across the other SE general conferences. Then we need to teach them in the paper and the presentation. So I don't know whether that's, to teach the reviewers or teach the authors. So that would be good if someone commented on that. And nope, in RE, an empirical study would be enough. So I think the comment there was about evaluation is mostly a comment about how a lot of the work in these areas relate to early phase artifacts. We don't have large repositories of those artifacts. When any evaluation in these areas is compared to an evaluation of work that's over, for example, open source software, and those papers are over, hundreds or thousands of systems because they're able to write a script and they're able to, compare their work over a large data set. And some of our evaluations are really deep and qualitative evaluations of, one complicated architecture, and the response is, well, that's one data point, and it's not enough. So I think that's where a lot of these comments come from. Any thoughts, discussion on this topic? Why we aren't publishing in SE, in ICSE?
It's related to this probably very inexperienced view. So I was at FSC PC this year, supposed to be requirements engineering person. I got 11 papers, only one on requirements, everything else on vulnerability detection for some reason. So one thing that I noticed was people who claim to be experts on requirements paper, but if I look up their profiles, they don't seem to be requirements experts. But everybody thinks because it's a soft topic, so they are expert in requirements, as compared to us who are requirements engineering researchers, who think these are specialized or more technical, so we are not really experts in that. So that could be potentially one reason, maybe?
Yeah, so this was the point that Jane made, right? And it's one thing that it's going to be hard to tease out, because when we looked at the reviewer database data, right, over a fairly large data set, at least with the ICSE data, the reviewers were, as you say, the reviewers are claim expertise.
Yep.
And we can't check that, right? We don't have the reviewer names, and so we can't check that and look at that and say, no, you don't.
But on the other hand, though, aren't we, so the area chair should know who are the area expert, right? So in a place like ICSE, and I saw the similar experience, like in theory, I'm also a formal method expert, which is I prefer very much to be a requirements expert, but I really I got very few paper on requirements. So I'm wondering,
Right.
People claim expertise, but on the other hand, the area chair should be maybe this is an extra check that could be done.
Yeah. So how many people are aware of the ICSE area chairs, the areas, right, the research areas, right, that there are areas? I'm sorry? It was just in the opening. Right, that the review process is categorized by area, and there is an area for requirements, architecture, and modeling. So, in some sense, that in itself gets to some of these questions about, are we shooting ourselves in the foot? Those areas are not completely self-contained, right? It's not the case that the area chair selects the reviewers. It's not the case that the area chair assigns the reviewers, right? And so there may be some opportunity there to provide some recommendations about how we can be improving the quality of the reviews through those actions. And it does mean that we would have to say yes to invitations to serve on the PC if we want there to be expertise on the PC.
I just want to offer another data point. So I work a lot with Alloy, which is one of the modern languages. And actually in like 2015, around that time, it was pretty hard to publish on Alloy at ICSE. But I've noticed that in the recent years, there are more papers on Alloy at ICSE and FSC. And I think that's because there's now recognition, or there's now actually a benchmark that people have been building for the last few years. And I think if you use this benchmark, if everybody who submits a paper about Alloy uses the same benchmark, it makes it much easier or harder for the reviewers to criticize it. Because now we have a fairly sizable benchmark. So I'm not saying this is the solution to this problem, but I feel like there is sort of one data point that sees the trend going maybe in slightly opposite direction, because now we have just more data that we can use to evaluate these works.
Yeah, so I think that is huge, right? I mean, that was how the testing community really started to be very active in increasing their publication rate, because they had the Siemens benchmark that they could all evaluate their work on, and it was relatively quick evaluation. It became a standard evaluation. So I think benchmarks are hugely helpful, and I think it's something that is very much missing in our areas, and kudos to the Alloy community for having such a benchmark. And there was some work for a while in the REMOD, trying to create a repository of models, but I think at that point there was just a lot of variability in those models. It was hard to use that as a benchmark. But VAMOS also has a benchmark of feature models, but these are sort of like data points that are helping those communities. All right, the microphone needs to move.
Yeah, I'm going to say something a little bit more different. I'm just wondering whether yet another reason why the proportion, the number of submissions is changing over the years is that there are just cycles over time, and researchers slowly shift toward slightly different topics. It used to be architectures 20 years ago. There have been a decade in which evolution and MSR was popular. Now it's more AI. It could be also because it's where money is going, where it's easier to get grants, and there is just more in those areas.
I'm going to let some of the audience respond to that.
So I can potentially respond for the software architecture area. I mean, we just ran a couple of months ago ICSA in L'Aquila, so I'm quite fresh with. We had about 200 participants. That for our community is numbers that are even better than what we had before COVID. Okay, just to say that at least for the area that I know more, there is still quite a lot of people working, attending, and contributing. The issue is more, not submitting or not getting accepted. And now I was checking this acceptance rate slide that you showed before, and if I correctly understand that this percentage is with respect to the submission, I mean, the software architecture and design got like 12% of acceptance rate when the average is 26. So from my point of view, now the question is why? And not to you, I mean, it's overall to the community, and I expect that most of the submissions are done by experts, by senior members, not just from, newcomers. So I'm wondering, and indeed we don't have an answer, clearly, but myself I'm wondering why it's almost at the least in the topic. And the comment that I was making before is very difficult to be published at ICSE, and looking at this data, then unfortunately reinforce the idea, oh, no, please, if I can get 10% of acceptance and I need to wait 1 year to publish, let's go to a domain-specific or to another conference. But the real question is why it's happening, that indeed, I don't have an answer.
Right, but to reiterate, this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been happening for a long time. At the start of every ICSI opening, the general chair shows the acceptance rates of different areas. We all gasp when we look at, architecture has had 14 submissions, 0 acceptances, and then we move on. And then the next year, the same thing happens, and we all gasp, and then we move on. And so our attempt here is to say we need to have a discussion.
Yes, now that I learned today that there were area chairs, I looked it up, and maybe one suggestion for future editions is that like having one area chair for both requirements, modeling and design. And in that case, I think in modeling, I haven't seen the person turning up at models in the past 5 to 10 years. I think it's not a good kind of message. So maybe for the area chair recommendations, ICSI could turn to the respective steering committees of the communities, because this is already like a bias against if we don't even know the person.
Exactly. And can you add that to the recommendations for ICSI?
So I wanted to go back to the topic of reviewers just kind of saying that they know a topic and they don't really know it. So I wonder I think part of the problem is that the program chairs actually do the assignments and the area chairs don't do the assignments. So the program chairs don't necessarily know, maybe the area chairs don't within a topic that covers multiple areas. And I'm wondering if, this is kind of controversial, but like, could people provide a little evidence that they're an expert in an area? Like, hey, I've published in one of these conferences, like I've published in models, or I've published in RE, or something like that, so that we could really see where people have engaged.
That's right, because reviewer expertise isn't necessarily I am an expert in this area. Often it means I am confident in the quality of my review, and those may be different things.
So I don't actually have a strong opinion on yes or no, but I was thinking instead why we don't ask the author to say which is my primary area, so that instead the papers get to, so that I'm taking if my paper is in multiple area, but just one.
That is done. No, that is done.
Just one. Well, then you just do one. Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. If you say just one, it goes to the person. You take your own responsibility because you recognize as an author
which area,
which is the area chair, which are the people that possibly understand your work better. Because then, you're just like, oh, I did an empirical study, but I'm also a requirements engineering person. And then you click both. You get 2/3 reviewer in empirical software engineering, and they kill your work in 3 seconds. So I'm just making an example. But I don't know, maybe it moved back the responsibility a little bit on, okay, I'm complaining that people don't understand my work. Let's say where it belongs. I don't know.
So I actually have a feeling that we have the data to cross-check reviewer expertise. So my understanding is when committees are formed, PC chairs have a spreadsheet where they very carefully identify areas for the people that they are inviting. We can, in principle, cross-check those expertise areas from areas of papers that those experts review, and without revealing too much about the actual names, to have a little bit of that expertise kind of.
Possibly, yeah.
Right, we have all the pieces, I think. We just need to be very careful about privacy, but in the amortized, amalgamated way, we can.
Yeah, I think it can be even automated without.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm gonna. Oops, I wondered about that. I'm gonna probably not spend a lot of time on this slide because I do want to get to the recommendations slides that I think are at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish today. So maybe I'll just, if you're okay with that, I'm just going to go on. Yeah. Marcia, can you? Sorry.
Thank you. So we actually talked about general versus specific conferences, and some of the things we see here is ASC and FSC.
That's true.
Which means we didn't quite ask the question as perfectly as we had hoped.
I'm not sure how I would
But,
ask
you know,
it
in hindsight,
differently.
you'll
I'm
learn
not
all
sure how
sorts
I
of
would
things.
ask it differently. It's
I don't know.
specialized conferences. But it is also true that even an SE, like if I have a paper in RE, I would probably submit to FSC before I submit it to ICSE.
Fair.
So I think there's an additional problem there, which is that FSC and ASC have become to look like non-specialized conferences because they, the F in FSC, I always say, means very little these days. And but that's a problem. It should be a specialized conference, but now there are many ICSEs, and that's another problem that we have as a community.
All right, so recommendations for ICSE. As you can see, with those first two categories, there were lots of comments. Even these were like individual respondents, all coming to the same conclusion, right? Number one, increase the representation of these of reviewers in these particular areas on the PC, and number two, possibly looking at the review criteria and having topic-appropriate criteria, the last thing has to do with like recognizing the effort that's required in evaluating work in these areas, right? So it's not the case that many of the evaluations are not like fast scripts over large bodies of artifacts, right? They are sometimes, very in-depth, expert, investigations of properties of artifacts, and so sometimes the effort is quite a bit high, even for small data points in an evaluation. And then in the third category, lots of support for special tracks in these areas, right? So in some sense, we don't have a special track, but we do have an area, right? And so, what can we be doing to make use of that area? So how about this? Yes, taking some good ICSA and RE papers and resubmitting them to ICSE. And seeing what happens. Well, you have to be careful. You can't resubmit the same work.
I know it, and that's very clear to me. But let's see. I mean, just to understand, those are good papers for the specific communities. So I'm curious to know what ICSE thinks about those papers. Clearly, the program chairs know, what those papers are, and clearly, they can filter them out as soon as, they get reviews.
So just, filter seed them into the regular review task.
It's like,
see what they would do.
It's like error seeding or,
Exactly. That's gonna be an interesting proposal to take to the steering committee.
Just one data point. So I do recall one paper in RE. It's not my paper that didn't make it in RE, and it was then just submitted. And it's just one paper that I happen to remember submitted to ICSE, and it got in. So it does work the other way too.
I noticed today that while essay and design topic is covered only in one session, but I believe there's more than one architecture and design session this year. Partly because of Journal First, not because of the acceptance rate of here. The room was extremely full. It was extremely full. I was there. It was standing room only. Have a better awareness of best practices for significance and validation in these communities. It is challenging to have REA use, so I'm not sure what was there. Real use cases, right, that's true. Or experiment with large data sets in most of the domains under this representation, and this, what we're talking about, and improving review comments for early phase SC papers would encourage submissions. review comments are not so insightful, right? So this again may get back to real expertise.
So I actually, it's not a common list, but you say something about there are two sessions because Journal First, right? So Journal First gets paper out of General Software Engineering journal, right? So it means that there are reviewers somewhere in the world in software engineering that appreciate this topic very much because it's still a competitive process. So maybe this is an idea, like try to see, who are these people and if they ever get invited in the PC because they clearly have the expertise. These are competitive journals. And maybe, this is how we enrich the community with people that actually have the expertise.
Yeah, so we didn't, we kind of discovered that question was also kind of missing, right? We asked about why, where are you publishing with respect to specialty conferences? We didn't ask, why are you publishing Journal First instead of submitting to the SE conferences? And, whether that's because the journals lend themselves to longer papers, or whether it lends themselves to having a discussion with the reviewers. It's not clear, right? It's also possible that there is this phenomenon sometimes as a reviewer at a conference where you've got a set of papers and the quality of your batch, right? And where certain papers fall in your batch can give you a slight bias against or for a paper. Any other recommendations for ICSE?
So I'm just thinking about the SimEval campaign that is in the natural language processing conferences in general. Maybe we can borrow a similar idea to the software engineering community where we introduce a campaign, a series of challenges and benchmarks that are introduced every year for underrepresented areas in software engineering, where a group of experts introduce a challenge that is interesting for the community, the researchers to participate in, and this circulates. So the topics change every year according to the interest of the larger software engineering community, not necessarily requirements engineering models and software architecture.
Yeah, I do think that benchmarks are important. But we're not going to have thousands. No matter what we do, we're not going to have thousands. Alloy might have thousands. I don't know. I don't do AI. Going for more recommendations for ICSE. All right. Recommendations for us, right? What should we be doing? So here again, the top comments from individuals were more co-located events, more workshops in these areas. And we have had some success there in having workshops in these areas that at least help bring more attendees in these areas that stay for the whole conference, so that it gives you an extra reason to come to ICSE just because you're gonna meet your colleagues. More recently, there has been some ad hoc talk about what if we co-located RE with ICSE? What if we co-located ICSA with ICSE? What if that was the venue for the main topic, main conferences in these areas? So just planting that seed. And then the second one is encouraging people to submit, right? So there's going to be a bit of a chicken and egg problem here, right? No one's really going to want to submit and wait a long time for an answer if they think it's not going to be accepted. But maybe if we can at least try to make some changes, make some recommendations that we think will help things, and then encourage people to submit because we think we have improved the process.
So one of the ideas might be to take papers accepted in these areas and showcase them in the specialized conferences together, or at least, I don't know, tweet about it, talk about this. So these are the types of work that got accepted. Here's what they're at. Here's what they do, because these people have figured out what works, and they might as well bring this knowledge to others, and maybe dissect these successes and these failures in a broader specialized community, and see what that means, what everybody's going to learn.
So sort of the reverse of what we did here. So we're here, we took the best papers from the specialty conferences, included in the program, taking some of the accepted papers in these topics and re-invite them as representative publications in the specialty conferences.
One question, Joe. I don't know if it's too much, but now I have in my mind this 12% acceptance rate that stays in my mind. I mean, how can I go back to my community and say, oh, next year let's submit much more to ICSI with that 12% in mind? So first point, if it would be possible to know in the last few years, not just 1 year, because I understand that doesn't make any sense just to look at 1 year, but to see the trends, if we can get this data. Okay, so that's one question. Huh?
6 years. 6 years.
So the acceptance is also in the 6 years.
This was
over 6
aggregation
years.
over
Okay,
6
so
years.
that's enough then. That's enough.
Yeah.
On the other side, I know that is difficult, but would it be possible to get the reviews without the name of the reviewers, or to run some automated analysis, as you
That's
said
our
before?
next step.
Because my question is, what is the community doing wrong with respect to ICSI expectations to get 12%? Because if we can understand that one, then it will be easier, not just to have our thinking, because they don't want this or they want to be more empirical, but we would have a concrete, objective understanding on why it's not working properly. So if that will be possible in any way, I mean, we will contribute as a community to help on this, but I think may be very, very useful.
Yeah, that is our next step, actually.
Yeah, on your first point, which is, how do you go back to ICSA and say, hey, submit more to ICSI? No, I think that's one of the problems, that we need to break this vicious cycle, and that kind of requires a leap of faith from everyone in kind of trying to restart. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this was to try to show that to see if there's willingness from the ICSI organization and its structures and the people that do come in changing its perception about these papers. And I think we need from the specialized conferences the same attitude. And it's a leap of faith.
Yeah, so similarly as Henry, I was quite much shocked by the data that Joe was presenting to us. If similar discrepancies would show up at answer reviews with respect to any underrepresented communities, this would be like a nationwide scandal in Canada. With such differences. So in that part, I think the first steps showing the data is on ICSI's side, not on the those communities' side, because it's a factor of 2 or more in the acceptance rate of certain domains. You cannot just blame the people who are submitting.
That's right. That's right. But one thing that we very well may eventually need to go back to the specialty communities is to find out more about how typical and best papers are evaluated by your research communities, and whether we should be embedding some of that in the area chair reviewing criteria.
I have a recommendation as a junior faculty. I think it's great and also very important for more senior faculty to continue to come to these conferences, because I know some people who have stopped coming, including the ones that I know very well. And I think it's just really important, right? Because that sort of, again, maintain the presence of the role models in these areas. So I think I just wanted to suggest that.
Yep.
I was just looking at the workshops accepted at ICSI this year. It seems that we are also very underrepresented in the workshops that are accepted or submitted, maybe. Maybe nobody submitted models or requirements workshops, so it was not accepted. That could be one. So we bring our best workshops, or like as a community, we put together like a steering committee to make sure that we bring together the best work, for instance, for RE at ICSI or FSC every year.
Thank you. So there were concrete attempts like MICE that Joe is referring to, which is modeling and software engineering, which runs every 2-3 years, 3-4, 5. That was explicitly trying.
It runs 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That explicitly brings a lot of modeling researchers to ICSI. This workshop has never been rejected when submitted to ICSI. So this is partly not that the community is not trying to propose these workshops. I don't think that there is any innate bias on the workshop selection committee against workshops in these areas. We're doing it to ourselves.
So, and as a general chair, I can concur with that. Like as a general chair, the bigger concern with workshop submissions are, multiple workshops on similar topics. A workshop on a different topic is almost always accepted.
So I wanted to go back because now we are talking about workshop, but you were mentioning, co-locating RE with ICSI, right? And so on this, I have very much mixed feeling because I was thinking, one of the things I noticed, many people have like 2 chances a year to travel, right? And so I was thinking, if you need to pick between your own community and coming to ICSI, that if you don't know many people, you're just like, and so you think, okay, I'm going with RE people and try to network and create new connection. So you would pick that, right? So on a side, I would say, oh, this is very good, right? It would be very good because you get both in one travel. On the other hand, I don't know, and maybe you all, have your own opinion on this, but I'm thinking, is this gonna destroy completely a smaller community, right? Being, then you are there, and then there is SIMS, and then there is MSR, and then there are a million people that cross, and then now in the 2 sessions, it's just like 2 days, there are half of the people that would normally go to RE, and they are all dispersed. So I'm not, I don't know if it's one or the other, right? So in my mind, most of the problem is that really I don't know much about software architecture, but I'm thinking that formal method and RE, I think I'm looking at discussion at the last 2 years on ICSI, we are terrible. We are terrible. Like you just, but there is this comma that is wrong in the wrong place. Let's reject this paper. And then you are by chance on this diversity paper and everybody's saying, but this is a fantastic topic to discuss. And I say, yes, let's discuss it not in the technical track, right? And so I'm thinking, it's just my example, but I think we are, and I'm not saying that we are mean. I'm saying like that we put our own bar very, very high. So,
Yeah, I think it is controversial. You say, many of us only are able to travel twice a year. It's such a good chance that that's going to decrease, right? We may only have one opportunity to travel a year. I'm sorry? In which case, yeah, what if RE and ICSI were co-located? Right, reduce the travel, but stay longer. Can you say that one more time?
Maybe we also try to help each other, the underrepresented communities, somehow RE helping ICSA, helping models. Somehow, for instance, I wasn't even aware of a conference called ICSA until a few weeks ago when I was invited to be on the OC just because I happen to look like an Indian person and ICSA is in India. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just kidding, but there could be a way of helping each other, like all these ants helping each other.
Well, yeah. Like I said, we saw that many of us do research in more than one area, right? There is quite a bit of overlap among these areas. Is there anything else that we should be talking about on this slide? Marcia.
Thank you. So I made a point here on the slide that I wanted to kind of bring up, that the mentorship here is not necessarily for the junior authors. I think some people have stopped submitting to ICSI because they were rejected, and communicating what are some of the best practices, not just for the junior people, but for everybody, may be worthwhile. And again, whether this is through showcasing ICSI papers back at the specialized conferences or any other way by which basically saying that, ICSI really likes something because I focus my work on the following benchmark. And how about we keep on doing this for everybody? For example, are very concrete ways to try to do this. I'm also recognizing a point here that I think I know who this comment is from, which is engage with industry on real problems, not two examples.
That's my guess too.
Again, I'm going to leave this one without comment, but it is not true that all of us aspire to engage with industry on two examples. I thought this was not a nice comment.
Yeah, not all the comments were nice. Jane.
I just want to respond to Marcia's first comment. So I think the mentoring thing is good, but we have to be careful that we're not, because it could turn into, make sure you've got a big data set, and make sure you have some, kind of quantitative analysis at the end. And that's exactly what we don't want, right? We want it to go the opposite way, that it's okay to have other kinds of papers. So I just want to be a little careful about that one.
That's what I'm worried about. We need to fix us to be more like, code-centric papers.
Yeah, I want to second that. So, I'm not sure that we need to be very careful about ICSI explaining to specialized conferences what their speciality is about, So I think it's the other way. I wouldn't go that way. I think it's the other way around.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on in the interest of time because we want to take our case to the town hall downstairs, which starts at 5:30 in 20 minutes. All right. So benefits of greater representation to us. So, what do we get out of having more representation at ICSI, at the general SE conferences? So there was a lot of support for simply having greater cross-fertilization of ideas, greater cross-fertilization of projects if everybody is in the room at these conferences, right? If we continue to do our work in silo, then we're going to continue to get results that don't integrate with other aspects of software engineering. And then the top comment in the second category was, yes, we want to, of course, everybody wants their work to be accepted by what's considered to be the top SE venue. Why aren't there more people at this panel?
That's my comment. I wasn't very sure. I wasn't very sure where to write that comment, so I just wrote it at the end.
That's FOSE. Yeah, it's always hard to compete with FOSE.
Is that the thing? Or but it's a valid question. The question I think I was trying to put is, is if we don't have buy-in from the people that are here that work on on all these topics, we have a problem.
That's right.
Just saying, Sorry.
This is fewer than
No,
12% of the attendees
but we know for a
at
fact
ICSI.
that there are more people here at ICSI that are interested in requirements in modeling and in software architecture and formal methods. I mean, I could make a list of 10 people that should be here and aren't. So my question is it they don't think it's important, or they thought that was more interesting? I don't know.
Wait for the microphone. Sorry.
I think it didn't show up in the mobile app. So I was talking to two one RE person and one HCI person, and they had no idea where it was. And Showcase doesn't quite tell us. So I don't want to completely blame everyone for not coming. So.
Yeah, and I'm an author of one of the showcase papers, and I was 45 minutes late, and the reason for that is that I discovered it too late in the program, and I would have expected that if there's such a discussion, that you write to all the showcase authors, hey, there's a discussion about this new category, please come to this session. I mean, you can't send this email to all participants of the conference, but at least to the showcase authors. And it's similarly, I mean, I feel that the conference is very big. And so I'm from the smaller conferences from FM, and it's very hard to get a real overview what's there. And I just go into random rooms and see what's there. Because there are so many sessions in parallel, and this is overwhelming, right?
There are many sessions in parallel, but often there's only one on requirements and one on architecture or modeling or formal methods. So you can find your own community pretty easily.
And Sebastian, I also think that since there are like 8 parallel sessions, some communities decided just to come with some representative from the steering committee, as I think it happens for architecture and for models, so to give the other the opportunity to attend and then to have feedback after that. So don't look at the numbers, that's what I'm saying, because it may be wrong looking at the empty room to consider that there is no interest. So that's my comment.
Well, that's true. Yeah, they're not here. Benefits to greater representation to ICSI. I think we're pretty all well in agreement here that at least if you're here, you probably think that there should be greater representation, broader representation of all SE topics at a general conference. And then the last one was on non-human factors with one X against other representation, or the topics with a big X at human factors, and then pluses elsewhere. So any final comments, suggestions, next steps?
I don't know if this has been discussed or not, but of course, if we are going to reflect on ourselves, it's maybe that the quality of what our work is not good enough. I don't know if that's come up as a topic of discussion. I mean, it is possible. I mean, there has been a decline over a number of years in number of papers in RE, and one could interpret it by the fact that maybe good students, for example, are working in other areas, and so we're getting less good students. So that's one hypothesis. I'm not saying it is, but I think we should just make sure that it's out there as a possible hypothesis. The other is that there's also been a huge trend in software engineering to publish more empirical-based papers rather than conceptual papers. And RE, I think the next set of advances, I think, in RE have to be conceptual to be able to cope with for example, very data-intensive learning type applications and systems. So would we publish them here? Would ICSI accept them? Probably not, because that doesn't fit the formula of a well-evaluated paper. So that's another hypothesis as to why perhaps there are no such papers. You could argue that actually it's very also apparent in the keynote. The keynote today was a requirements keynote. It's all about discovery of what systems we want to build and why we want to build them. But there is an issue because nobody engaged with that keynoter to discuss that requirements engineering has covered ethnographic methodologies for eliciting requirements quite a lot. And I think, there's some questions here and there, but that was a requirements talk that did not engage the audience, I think, as much as an ICSI keynote normally would. So there are problems for having underrepresentation, which is you sometimes get keynotes and presentations that don't get challenged perhaps as much as they should. That's my
Exactly.
3 random points.
Exactly. Well, with respect to the evaluation, we did talk a lot about that. And I don't know to what degree people have been continuing to, to annotate the Google Slides. But whether we can take advantage, for example, of the fact that requirements, architecture, models, we have our own area in the ICSI review process, right? And so we could be advocating for review evaluations that is appropriate for papers in this topic, right? Not every ICSI paper needs to have the same evaluation. And different evaluation techniques have been played with at ICSI over time, right? Recognizing that some papers have a more of a novelty contribution, some papers are more of an empirical study. So, we could be advocating for that.
Thank you, Joe. Very interesting session. I'm wondering if we can also go further and look at funding for these topics.
Look at what?
Funding, yeah. So, because I'm working in 1 or 2 of these topics, I get funding, industrial funding, and there are concrete, real issues to work on still. And but when we submit papers to ICSI or other venues, even if it's on industrial problems, they got rejected because there is not enough data or not enough experiment, etc. So I'm wondering if we can look into funding, I don't know, in Canada,
That's going to be harder, exactly. Like with the review process, we have access to the data because the people who are involved are general chairs and PC chairs of the most recent conferences, right? So we have access to the review databases. We do not have access to the review databases of the granting agencies, and there are many more of those than there are of ICSI, FSE, ASE. So we'll probably stick with the publication data and see what we can do there.
So just to that point, so I've worked in the industry as a requirements engineer, never used my own research in practice, so probably I'm guilty. But there are real problems in the industry, for instance, for requirements. It's just that they don't know this is requirements engineering. As an anecdote, we recently did a large industry with practitioners. Some of them in China, most of them said, who gives a shit about requirements, first of all, or they don't even know about what is requirements engineering. But the problems they have are requirements engineering problems. It's just they don't know that this is requirements engineering. Or what we know, don't know that these are the problems that they are facing. So there is this gap. Yeah.
I thought we had fixed that problem.
I think that what he says kind of connect with what Bashar said, right? Because Bashar said, oh, this can be connected with the quality of our paper, think about ARI. And I think that there is a problem instead of branding, right? We were talking about this, that there is a lot of requirements engineering work that gets published in other places because requirements engineering fit in many other places. And so because I don't want to defend just requirements engineering community, I would not dare to say that formal method work is low quality. I mean, they prove things, so they have to be true and valuable, right? So I don't think this is the reason necessary. But though also, like talking about the keynote this morning, I would have never recognized her as a requirements engineer. That was not. And so if Bashar, who belongs to this community, recognized a non-engaging requirements engineer, then I think we have many more problems than what we were discussing. I don't know.
You need the microphone to speak. You have to have the token.
So I am not someone who is very dogmatic about what a discipline should look like. So I'm quite happy to think that RE, software engineering, should evolve and change over time. So that if we don't recognize something as part of our discipline, that's okay. But it could be that we just need to expand our discipline. So I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm arguing with you or against you here. But what I recognized in the talk here, in the morning's keynote, was that she was talking about different ways of discovering what people want, so that we can deliver software systems. I think she was referring to tech in general, but software systems that meet certain constituencies' requirements. And she said that we don't perhaps engage with them. We might want to use ethnomethodology or ethnography. So were you saying that that's not part of it, or is this?
Thank you. No, it's scary. No, it's not. I mean, the topic is definitely, but what I'm trying to say is that she was coming from such a different background, and then we were also saying that, I would have expected actually complete different angle. But I want to believe that the discipline is changed, but what I also think is that we are not branding it well enough for people to understand that what they are doing different belongs to RE. So I kind of agree with you on this piece.
And this is a fascinating conversation.
It's our.
But you two need to talk offline, and we need to make our way downstairs to the town hall and make our case. So thank you so much. This has been a very great and informative discussion. And if you still have comments, keep adding to the digital document.
Joe, one question you didn't ask this group is about showcase for next year.
Talk about a biased audience. Is anybody interested in a showcase next year? Everybody says yes.